Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're exploring one of Cornwall's most charming and historically fascinating working harbours, Mevagissey. The name derives from its first acceptance as a hamlet in 1313, when it was named after two Cornish saints, St Meva and St Issey. I've parked in the harbour car park early this morning to catch that gorgeous golden light, and I'm hoping to take advantage of the weather and the quietness before the harbour wakes up. From here we're going to walk up to the viewing platform to get our bearings and then circuit the entire harbour, exploring centuries of stories about pilchards, smugglers, boat builders, and even a few Hollywood cameos along the way. So here we are at the viewing platform. Straight into the sunshine. Yes. So yeah. Oh, straight through a cobweb. Nice. So here's the platform. The views from up here are absolutely stunning. The twin harbours spread out below us. Colourful fishing boats bobbing about on the water. And the narrow medieval streets winding like a maze through the village. You can get a good idea of the size of the town from up here. Here's my drone's eye view. The lighthouse. You can't see too much over this way because the sun's shining, but it still looks nice. It's just after 8 in the morning, end of November. I'm not complaining. These apartments all got a nice view over the sea. Okay. Let's all wander down. What makes Mevagissey truly special is its double harbour system, one of the few in the entire UK. The inner harbour was built back in 1774 at a cost of £4,235, which was an absolute chunk of money at the time and worth over £500,000 today. Then in 1888, when the pilchard industry was still booming, they added the impressive outer harbour, expanding from just 3 acres to a whopping 10 acres. It cost between £20,000 and £30,000. That's over £9 million in today's money. But here's where the town experienced some unwanted drama. In 1891, a great blizzard hit Cornwall and absolutely destroyed the South Pier and its parapet, by which I mean completely demolished it. But the locals weren't defeated, they rebuilt it, and by 1897 the outer harbour was fully operational again. That's real Cornish resilience for you. But of course their livelihoods also relied upon it. Lovely little shops. Two dogs in the top window. Dolphins. It might be looked at through the window. Bit busy all of a sudden. Town's waking up. And get off the road. Coffee and clothing. There's the ship in. Hey. Fresh bread. Cellar bar. They've got the Christmas tree up already. And the Fountain Inn. I think it's supposed to be the oldest pub in Meva. 15th century. It's about 150 years before they set off to America. Oh, that's nice. It's cool stuff. Just how they used to lay the pilchards in barrels. Very good. Morning. Sweet thunder. Wow, they decorated for Christmas too. Oh, that's cute. Hello, Mr. Seagull. Your pal's calling you. Cliff Street. Good name for a street built on a cliff. Right. Hello. Hello, woofer. The seals. Now, to understand Mevagissey, you've got to understand pilchards. These little silver fish were the industry. At the height of the pilchard trade, Mevagissey was landing between 10,000 and 12,000 tonnes a year. Imagine that for a moment. Thousands upon thousands of large barrels, or hogsheads as they called them, being hauled onto the quays. In 1730 alone, the catch was absolutely staggering. Most of the fishermen were crews or owners of luggers, and they fished mostly for herring in winter, mackerel in spring, and pilchard in summer. The fish were exported all over Europe, particularly to Spain, Italy and Portugal, where they were a staple in Catholic countries during Lent. One hogshead could hold about 3,000 fish. Multiply that by the sheer volume and you've got an absolute frenzy of activity down here, day and night, especially during the season. Here's a curious fact: the pilchards supplied to the Royal Navy were actually nicknamed Mevagissey ducks. Typical forces humour. It sounded good on the menu, but I'm sure they all knew it was actually fish they were eating. In a similar vein, when dogfish was caught locally and sold in London fish and chip shops, they called it rock salmon. Mind your head, bonk. There's some good old original timbers. Sun's making itself known. That's a great name for a pub, isn't it? The Shark's Fin, especially in a fishing village. Do they sell shark's fins? Probably not. Just have around about the sun. Well, it smells nice down here. There's an interesting piece of history. There's been an unbroken boat building tradition on the island quay since 1745. This didn't start because locals were all great carpenters. It started because they needed fast boats for smuggling, so they learned their trade as they went. You see, the Crown had slapped heavy taxes on salt, and fishermen needed salt to preserve their catch of pilchards. So what did? They started smuggling. They'd build these incredibly fast, sleek vessels, two-masted Mevagissey sloops and cutters that were absolutely renowned for their speed. With 1,000 square feet of sail and a fair wind, they could cross the English Channel to Roscoff in Brittany in just 8 hours. That's quick. One of the most notorious smugglers was a boat builder called Captain James Dunn. He wasn't just building ships for the trade, he was running an entire money laundering operation to hide the profits. This guy was an absolute entrepreneur of crime. The story goes that John Wesley visited Mevagissey several times, and that John Dunn became an instant Wesleyan convert. Mind you, it still took him 11 years to stop his smuggling activities. Notice the narrow winding streets of Mevagissey. The stories go that they were reportedly deliberately designed to confuse and slow down the revenue officers trying to chase down smugglers. This may or may not be true. The townspeople literally engineered their own streets to confuse officials. Maybe it's one of those stories to take with a pinch of imported salt. In 1832, much of Cornwall was hit by a cholera outbreak. In 1849, a second outbreak proved much worse, and most of the townspeople moved to a hastily created tented village at Portmelon. Like many other Cornish villages, Mevagissey suffered due to the old village being densely built around steep, narrow lanes. There's another good car park to stay in if you're only here for a short time. It's quite close to the harbour. Next to the lavender pillow. These great old cottages. We go back to the cholera outbreak. Like many other Cornish villages, Mevagissey suffered due to the old village being densely built around steep, narrow lanes. Waste often ran into street drains or the harbour. Drinking water sources were limited and easily contaminated. The freshwater stream used by townspeople was also used to dump soil from their toilets, and fishing families often lived in cramped cottages, increasing the spread. Not surprisingly, the villagers who got their fresh water from a well in the town stayed largely untouched by disease. In a population of maybe 2,000 to 2,500, even the 120 who died was a major disaster for the townsfolk. Mevagissey later made significant improvements to its water supply and sewerage in response to repeated outbreaks of cholera, typhoid and other common diseases at the time. If we look here at the old watch house as we're walking around, it's one of Mevagissey's most iconic images, built on multiple levels right on the rocks. The lower part of the building served as a watch house where preventative officers were stationed to try and stop the very smuggling that was making the town rich. Poor fellas who were fighting a losing battle against an entire community united in defence of the salt taxes. The irony is beautiful. These were all the boat building sheds, and now converted into quite luxury apartments. Very nice too. This one is still making boats. And this one is now the museum. As we reach this left pier, you spot Mevagissey Museum, built in 1745 as a boat builder's workshop. Absolutely free entry, run entirely by passionate volunteers. It's the #1 attraction in the village on TripAdvisor, and deservedly so. Inside you'll find antique fishing tools, historical photographs and personal stories that really bring the harbour's past to life. On the museum's top floor You'll find a collection of items that have either been recovered from local beaches or which managed to find their way into a local fisherman's net. There are whale bones, turtle shell and an aircraft propeller. There's even an impressive armada anchor at the entrance. Pop in if you get the chance. The volunteers are absolutely full of fascinating local tales. Back to the watch house. For 349,000. He spent a lot on modernising it while keeping its old world charm and put it on the market for £1 million. It sold in 2022 for 950,000 and it's now a private house. That's certainly some house. Your bedroom on a cliff top. Well, I'm guessing that's probably a living room. The harbour office. Opposite the harbour office we can see this quay door section of the harbour wall, and you can spot the 9 holes made specifically for the Home Guard during the Second World War. Imagine standing at your post here looking out across the water, wondering if enemy seaplanes would suddenly appear. That must have made a few pulses race. This, believe it or not, is a tiny beach when it's not high tide. I don't think it gets used much though. Not unusual. Maybe a hole cut out of there so you can get light into your windows. Well, the sun's decided to hide behind a cloud for a while, but never mind, we'll press on. Here's a quirky fact. In the 1800s, Mevagissey actually issued its own banknotes. Ball's Bank operated right here in the village, backing currency with, you guessed it, the Pilchard trade. The actual bank building no longer exists, but it's thought that Bank Street and Bank Terrace are named after it. We've all heard of Pear's soap. Andrew Pears was born in Mevagissey in 1770 and moved to London in 1787 to train as a barber. At that time, well-to-do ladies wanted their skin to look as pale as possible, so he sold powders and creams to help in that aim. Tanned skin was associated with outdoor workers, so he set about creating his own clear soap using glycerine and a scent reminiscent of an English garden. It first sold in 1807 and did very well. His grandson Francis joined the business in 1835, and it continued to grow, eventually becoming popular in America too. Once Lever Brothers took over the business, production happened in a couple of different UK factories, but it's now produced in India by Hindustan Unilever. Moving from the 18th to the 20th century, and Mevagissey's picturesque harbour caught the attention of filmmakers. The village has hosted some seriously impressive productions. In 1945, Ealing Studios filmed Johnny Frenchman, right here, a comedy drama about a Cornish and Breton fishermen who clash over crab fishing before eventually burying their differences during World War II.
Good evening, Madam Kavarik.
How are you, Mr. Harbour Master?
If I remember right, that boat of yours is a 17-tonner.
Well?
17 tons at 4p per registered ton makes your harbour dues 5 shillings and 8p.
Why, this is a free harbour under stress of weather.
The weather's fine enough.
There is a storm blowing up over the north coast.
This happens to be the south coast.
But we were shooting north of Land's End.
Well, goodbye, Padron.
Goodbye. And there is not a harbour between there and St. Ives.
Pity for you, ain't it?
Not a sou will you get from me, you Cornish robber. I'll go on to Newlyn.
Please yourself, my dear.
I thank you. I'll recall my crew.
It's actually not a bad way to spend a rainy afternoon if you can find a copy to watch. Here's the best film buffs bit. In 1978, when John Badham was directing Dracula, starring Frank Langella, he chose Mevagissey Harbour as the Gothic Cornish backdrop.
Count Dracula. Good evening. Miss Seward.
Good evening, Count.
Dr. Seward. Miss Van Helsing. My savior. I trust you're feeling improved.
Yes.
And St Michael's Mount was used as Carfax Abbey. Other films shot here include Never Let Me Go in 1953 with Clark Gable. He stayed at the Pilchard Hotel, which we saw in a previous video. Another film which ended up as a comedy series was Bad Education with Jack Whitehall, and various Rosamund Pilchard novels got the TV adaptation treatment. So if you're standing on this quay looking at the harbour, you may recognise places where Hollywood has filmed. Mevagissey is certainly a unique backdrop for any film director. Here's something unique. The fishermen of Mevagissey own the seabed surrounding the harbour. Normally this would be owned by the Duchy, but Mevagissey has special ownership rights. The original Harbour Trust documents were written in 1774 in the Ship Inn, and they were bound not in leather from a cow, as you might expect, but in ling skin, a fish in the cod family. That's certainly keeping it local. The famed Mevagissey milkman on a motorbike was a local character named Cyril Firth. He was known as the fastest milkman in the West because he attached a Norton motorbike, known for its Isle of Man TT races, to his milk float. He's still discussed in local history forums where they mention a milkman who used a motorbike and sidecar with a milk churn to deliver milk up the steep roads like Cliff Street. In Mevagissey Remembered online, local man Rolly Dayton tells this story of the Mevagissey Parliament. The old men in Mevagissey, mostly retired fishermen, would sit on the bench seat and discuss the weather, local politics, fishing, and what the younger fishermen were doing wrong. Their keen eyes never missed anything that happened on the harbour, so the seat was known as Mevagissey Parliament. Mr. Dayton's grandfather, Claude Hunkin, owned the house the old men are leaning against. The simple seat unfortunately went right across the entrance to his workshop and prevented his son and Mr. Dayton's father from storing their motorcycles. So in 1954 he cut a hinged flap in the seat. Technically the ground directly in front of the house was owned by the Harbour Trust, and they were incensed. They demanded the seat was replaced without the hinged flap. The case went to court and the Harbour Trust was represented by Miss Effie Hunkin, so it was Hunkin versus Hunkin. Judge P.L.E. Rawlins of Liskeard Court found Claude Hunkin had a right to access to his house and that the seat could be adapted to suit both needs. Judge Rawlins then went on to say that members of the Parliament were not a limited, ascertainable class, and he could not say how they were elected, whether it was by right, age, force of arms, or verbosity. All I can find is, he said, that if anyone not a member sits on the seat, it's likely to lead to dire consequences. Judge Rawlins pointed out that he had not dissolved Parliament, for it had never been recalled. Parliament continues, but like so many ancient traditions, it must adapt itself to changed circumstances. He went on to say that whenever the situation arose, Parliament must rise. Some years later, the seat was removed by the Harbour Trust and it's never been replaced. It seems the shop here has made a nod to the Parliament by adding a small bench. Here's one of my favourite bits of Mevagissey trivia. In 1895, this little fishing village became one of the first places in the entire UK to have electric street lighting. And it wasn't powered by coal, it was powered by pilchard oil. When pilchards were processed, massive quantities of oil oozed out. A single barrel could produce between 18 and 45 litres of oil. With thousands of barrels being processed each season, that's an enormous amount of fuel. So locals had a brilliant idea. Why not use that oil to generate electricity? The Mevagissey Electric Supply Company built a power station on West Quay in 1895, and suddenly Mevagissey had the latest in modern lighting technology, powered entirely by its most abundant resource. Better yet, the same system powered the harbour's lighthouse, so ships out at sea were literally being guided home by light generated from the fish they'd come to catch. There's a poem about pilchards that goes meat, money and light all in one night, and Mevagissey proved it. For more than a century before this, mind you, pilchard oil had been lighting London's streets too. Families supplemented their income by selling the extracted fish oil known as train oil, from the German Die Träne, meaning teardrop. Blacksmiths, shipwrights and all sorts of craftspeople used it as a lubricant and waterproofing agent. The electricity company is now a public toilet. Mevagissey received its first lifeboat in 1869. This came after local people had repeatedly requested RNLI support. The catalyst was a heroic rescue in 1857, when the French schooner Rochelaise ran aground near the harbour entrance. 2 local boats went out in dangerous conditions to rescue the crew of 5, and for this bravery, the RNLI presented silver medals to Coast Guard officer Henry Pomeroy and pilots Joseph Lay and William Clow. This impressed the RNLI enough that when they sent an inspector in 1869, they agreed to station a lifeboat in Mevagissey. The original lifeboat boathouse was built at Port Mellon Cove, just south of the main village, on land leased from the Earl of Mount Edgecombe. The lifeboat was formally brought into service on the 2nd of October 1869. The single-storey building still exists today. It's been converted into a private house. When the outer harbour was completed in the 1880s, the RNLI decided to replace the original lifeboat with a bigger, more capable vessel. However, a devastating storm in 1895 damaged the new lifeboat, despite it being moored in the safer outer harbour. This demonstrated the need for better facilities, so a proper boathouse and slipway was built on the south side of the outer harbour, officially opened on the 12th of June 1897. The Mevagissey lifeboat station operated for 61 years until 1930, when it closed. The reason was a motor lifeboat was provided to Foy Lifeboat Station in 1928, which proved powerful and capable enough to cover the coast around Mevagissey as well. With one modern lifeboat now covering a wider area, Mevagissey station was no longer needed. From the 1930s, the building was converted into a café. During the Second World War, the building served a very different purpose. It was converted into a gun emplacement and was manned by the Home Guard. The café use was temporarily halted as the building became part of coastal defence preparations. In the mid-1950s, the building was converted into an aquarium, which is its current use. There's a good view from here when the doors were opened. And you'll see the original slipway. Today there are around 60 registered fishing boats operating out of Mevagissey, with modern ice plants, cranes and storage facilities. Unlike many smaller harbours nearby that have become purely tourist attractions, Mevagissey is still a working fishing port. You'll see boats coming and going, fishermen mending nets, the daily catch being unloaded. There's genuinely authentic maritime life happening right here. As we continue around the harbour towards the pier, you'll notice how the colourful fishing boats are absolutely packed with life. Mackerel season brings incredible catches. It's not uncommon in early summer to see 4 mackerel pulled out on a single line, cast after cast. The crab population here has apparently learned they can have an easy life eating pork scraps if they cooperate with the tourism industry. So if you're here with kids, grab a crab line from one of the shops and you're guaranteed a good afternoon. Some of these crabs are supposedly so picky they'll only eat bacon from the local butcher. I think that's a tail put out by the local butcher. So there we are, finishing up at the pier on the far side of the harbour, looking back across the water at the medieval streets, the viewing platform where we started, and the twin harbours that have been the lifeblood of this village for centuries. Is genuinely moving. Mevagissey isn't as famous as some Cornish harbour towns, and that's partly why it retains so much authenticity. You've got real working fishermen, genuine history, incredible stories of Pilchard empires and smuggling adventures, wartime defences, and even Hollywood moments. And all of it is framed by some absolutely gorgeous coastal scenery. Whether you're into maritime history, fishing heritage, or just brilliant Cornish character, Mevagissey delivers. If you enjoyed this tour of the harbour, please hit the like button, subscribe for more coastal adventures, and drop a comment below. Have you visited Mevagissey? Do you have any Pilchard tales or stories about Cornish smugglers? I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next adventure. Bye for now.